Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Oh, welcome. I got there in the end. I'm unmuted. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hyper Island LinkedIn Live. This is the first that we're doing actually in a series of 6 that we've been doing on Zoom as well the past couple of weeks, just to prototype and make sure that we get to a position where we feel a little more confident. And now we're live on LinkedIn. I can't believe it. From the Manchester studio as well, which is wonderful. And I'm joined by a wonderfully esteemed network of and team of people here. Catherine, Kelly, Greg, please wave, say hello. Hello. We will introduce you in just a moment. My name's Rebecca Taylor, and I'm the programme leader and academic lead of MA Europe here in Manchester at the Hyper Island studio. This is our kind of base. Looking a little quiet behind me, as you can see. All very, very busy actually right now. A lot of our Hyper Island students are out in the world doing their industry research projects. Lots and lots of love to you all. If you can ever catch up with this, we're sending you lots of high energy vibes from Manchester right now, as it's a busy period for you. And welcome to those that have come in. Hello. Oh, I'm seeing the comments box is already populating. Ricardo, Ashita, good. Mariana, hello. Wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much. And Amy, yes, you're just over there and you're in the comments box. I love this hybrid working. Right. So we're going to start our little session today with, let me just open it out to Greg, Kelly and Catherine. Would you like to just say your hellos, who you are, and why you're here?
Hi, thank you, Becca. I can jump in. Yes, I'm Catherine. I'm programme leader in Manchester here with Becca, with the full-time digital management students, digital experience design students. Really happy to have Kelly and Greg with us today. Kelly is on my right here, and I'll let you introduce yourself, but just so sure, because you're actually doing your industry research project right now.
Yeah, in the thick of it.
Thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here. I'm Kelly. I'm from Los Angeles. I'm a British American designer, living in Manchester and doing my IRP on disability design and accessibility design.
Thank you. We'll bounce over to Greg.
Thank you. Morning, everyone. So I'm Greg Ashton. I'm currently a civil servant and service designer working at the DWP. And my background is in tech for good. So I've worked for many years in the for good sector. So working with charities, non-profits on all sorts of different products and prototypes, from chatbots to talk about death to cycling help apps. So lots to talk about today.
Thank you so much, all. And you see, Greg and I have known each other a good number of years, so long now that we're morphing into each other. Have you noticed? Glasses, quiff. When you move to Manchester, this is what happens. So anyway, welcome everybody. It's so lovely to see you, and thank you so much for joining us, team. We are today talking and focusing based on the success of last week's recorded session in the studio with Julia and Alexis, who are also Hyper alumni. Thank you again so much for last week. We're building on the success of digging that bit deeper into what Agile Making and Prototyping really is. And it is a key module across both of the master's programs that you would be undertaking here in Manchester. So both the Digital Management MA and the Digital Experience Design MA programs run this Agile Making and Prototyping module. Kelly will share her experience very shortly of what that felt like and how she's actually applied it to her industry research project thus far. But without further ado, allow me to just shout out to the comments. But I'm so impressed. There's a lot of activity there. People saying hello from London, Zurich, Colombia, Stockholm. Thank you so much. Brooklyn. Gosh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Let's do a little waterfall check-in then. So you've mentioned hi from where you are. Hello, Sanjay from India. Yes. Would you mind doing a little waterfall check-in in the chat box and adding, why are you here? Why are you here in the LinkedIn Live today? If you could share that with us in that comments box, that would be wonderful. And then we can go from there. Why are you here, Nadine? Nadine from Zurich. I know Nadine. Hello. So good to see you. Yes, pop that in the comments box. Check in with why you're here in the Zoom, in the Zoom room, in the LinkedIn live session today. What we're going to go on to talk about, just while you're doing that. Vidya, oh, hello. Dubai, fantastic. Okay, so we've got a little over half an hour now. We're running until 11:45 UK time. And so I want to give the floor and the space really to Kelly and Greg, because it's just wonderful to have you here. Before I do, just to give you a little overview of what to expect, we'll have the Q&A with Catherine, Kelly and Greg, and then we'll use the last 10-15 minutes to kind of close the session and involve you in any Q&A you might have in the comments box and anything you might want to share there. Richard, thank you for popping that in there. I'm thinking of joining either one of the master's business programs. Oh, already in data science, how interesting. To get a little sneak peek for the future module. Amelia, hello. Veronica, excellent. Oh, fantastic. Okay, right, I'm getting distracted reading all the comments. Thank you. It's so wonderful to have your involvement here. UX, UI. Yes. Know very little about Agile Making. It's coming from an anonymous person. Okay, right. So we're going to find out a little bit more then about what it is. So we know some of the buzzwords. Okay, we brain dumped these earlier. Rapid prototyping, experimentation, making early and making work visible. Okay, kinesthetic learning. Anybody come across that? I'm a great kinesthetic learner. I love to learn by making and doing. And co-creation, another big buzzword that comes up when you talk about agile making and prototyping. Communication, I think a wonderful quote that has certainly left its legacy and is echoed around this studio on a regular basis is done is better than perfect. And that is just a wonderful place to start when you start thinking about making and putting your ideas out from here and in here and into something in the world so that you can talk around it. And yeah, what better way to do that than to get your hands dirty, roll up those sleeves and test your ideas, test your thinking. Right, okay, we're going to move across. I'm going to hand the baton, the mic over to you, my lovely dear colleague, Catherine and Kelly in the room next door. I shall mute myself. And there we go. Greg, over to you as well.
Thanks, Becca. So we'll go to Kelly first of all. Thank you for being here today. So from Hollywood to Hyper Island, tell us about your journey and what this experience has been like up to now.
Yeah, sure. So my background is in TV and film, and I worked in Hollywood for 6 years before I made a switch to digital. I ran a freelance marketing company for a couple of years before realizing that there was so much I didn't know about the digital space, and I thought a master's would be a good way to kind of hone my skills, get some credibility, and was pointed to Hyper by an alum, which was great. So background in film, switched to digital, but they actually have a lot more in common than I would have thought.
Tell us about the things you've noticed, the similarities, and where you can draw comparisons.
Sure. Well, yeah, film and TV, it's storytelling. You know, you work with a script, you make edits, so it's like a bit of a prototype in itself. And then you shoot it, you make edits, and then you show it to people who tell you what's wrong with it, and then you fix it again. So it's a similar process to the design and prototyping process. And storytelling is also a lot more important in user experience design and research than I thought it would be. Like the way that you communicate your findings to the client is really important, and weaving that red thread, it translates in a lot of ways.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And how was this experience for you coming to Manchester? And obviously you've been in the pandemic predominantly whole year, and what that's been like for you?
It's been really great, actually. I mean, moving during a pandemic, couldn't have gone better, all things considered. I think Hyper made it pretty easy. We were online most of the program was online, but we were able to meet in person towards the end. But yeah, this was a really valuable experience professionally, and I think personally, I grew a lot this year. It's been really wonderful.
Oh, thank you for telling us that. What role? So this was the newly accredited module that you've experienced this year for the first time with our students, and Agile Making and Prototyping is kind of a brand new standalone module on this masters, and the reason for that is a response to industry, and that it needs to, we need to surface it, and it needs to be making and doing is forming a much more stronger part of research. Tell us, how did that module kind of weave into the other modules, and how did you experience that?
I think this module, because it was a lot of it was self-directed, so we were really encouraged to make mistakes and do things wrong, and then figure out why and look at it really critically afterwards. And I think that applied to most of the modules, because it encouraged me, at least, to not be scared of messing things up and making more, I guess, out of the box decisions. So it was a difficult module, but I think it was one of my favorites, in that I got the most out of it, just because I made so many mistakes, like you're supposed to, I guess.
Okay, thank you. And what were some of the tools or techniques that helped you become comfortable with that and helped you to learn this way of working?
I learned some, I guess, some industry standard tools during the program. So I was familiar with XD by the end, and Figma. I'm using Figma for my IRP. But the tools that we used for the actual module, we used Zoom, and we used paper prototyping. Like, we did a lot of drawing. Is that what we did?
Yeah.
It's a kind of sort of a range from physical in real life prototyping to digital tools as well.
Okay. And could you tell us a little bit more about how you choose a certain type of prototype for a different stage of the process, and what the purpose is of that? What are you trying to do by prototyping? Some people joining us today may not have much experience, others probably very, very experienced, but it'd be really nice to hear from you kind of what you learned through that process about prototyping.
We were encouraged to sort of just jump right in, and normally in the design process there's like a bit of a research bit. We were encouraged to just really start making things in whatever way we could. So we needed tools that were quite agile and easy to like mess up and then put back together. So we used Miro a lot, which was really great for just brainstorming. And then like I said, paper, just making terrible designs and realizing why they're terrible and then doing them again.
And who interacted with those paper prototypes?
Mostly, we recruited mostly friends and family for this one. It was quite fast paced, but we did use them on, I guess, each other as well. Like, we would, I had 4 people in my group, and we would kind of meet every week and come with one design, and we would all kind of critique each other's and build from there. So it was very collaborative.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what have you taken with you? So your IRP, for everyone at home, the IRP is the Industry Research Project. So after the 6 months taught part of the program on the Masters here, you go on to do an 18-week real deep dive into your chosen area, Industry Research Project. And we're lucky Kelly's still with us in Manchester here doing hers. All the other students, as Becca said, are around the world. What have you taken forward from the taught part of the program into this Industry Research Project now? And what is it? You mentioned Figma that you're using, and how are you using that to communicate your ideas and to get feedback and to iterate?
Just for some background, my client partner is Headspace, the meditation app, and they've been really wonderful and really hands-on, and we do have quite frequent check-ins on the progress of my project. So I think something really important that Hyper Island taught me is presentation skills, and how important it is to sort of communicate your ideas well. But I do use Figma to present like how the clickable prototype is progressing. A lot of slideshows. We love slideshows at Hyper Island. I think that's mostly how to communicate it. But also this module was great. Again, like I said before, and just sort of forcing you to do things you wouldn't normally try. And I was surprised at how that stuck with me even when I'm on my own in the industry research project. That was really valuable.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So yeah, a little flip back and looking now at what you're doing, and your deadline is in
10 days.
10 days.
9 days. 10 days.
10 days. Thank you so much, Kelly, for joining us today. Okay, I'm going to flip forward to Greg, if I may, invite you in. Greg, you have worked in a number of different roles and different ways. Could you tell us how prototyping has played a part in the work that you do, and what's its main purpose? Why is it important? You're now industry-based. You know, we're hearing the needs of industry, and that's how we changed and developed these programs. So it'd be great to hear from you around that, please.
Yeah, sure. I was just having a look through the comments actually, and Alexandra had said, interested to see how Agile Making Prototyping can be applied in markets that don't share a test trial approach. And I think it's a really important question, because it really gets to the heart of why prototyping is important. There are a couple of things that prototyping really helps you to do. I worked in the charity sector, and risk management is a key thing within the charity sector. The idea of trial and error, just years ago, wouldn't even have been considered in the charity sector, because of that idea of error. Just it would terrify them. But actually, a prototype really is about reducing that risk, because you've got an option which is traditional waterfall, where we can go through, produce this project. We're trying to reduce risk all the way through, so we'll go for the safest options. But actually, you end up missing out on understanding where the risks are and baking them into whatever product or service that you're developing. Whereas prototyping allows you to identify those risks much earlier on, and then remove those or mitigate them from the final product. So it can be used even in areas that don't traditionally use that test and trial approach. And the reason prototyping really helps with this is because there's no amount of discovery that you can do, no amount of research that can bridge that gap between what you know about the problem that you're trying to solve and the solution. There's always going to be a gap, might be smaller or bigger, but there's always going to be a gap where you go, we don't know if this solution is going to solve that problem. And you have to test that. That's the only way you're going to know if you've designed the right solution, is by testing it. And you don't want to be testing it once you've built this big thing right at the end. You want to be testing it as early as possible, so you're reducing the cost. And by reducing costs, you're reducing risk. So, and that was always a big key thing. You're working in the charity sector, cost is a major concern. So, it really made sense to prototype and test as often as possible, so that you were constantly counting those pennies and saving money for the client.
Thank you, Greg. That's wonderful to hear. So the purpose of it and the benefits of it. Can you tell us a little bit about the doing? So Kelly's mentioned a couple of the tools that she's used, and paper prototyping is a really easy go-to. Everyone's got a bit of paper. What level of prototyping do you think, in your experience as well, that's been appropriate, at which level, and who you're engaging with and who you're asking to interact with it at what stage?
Yeah, so the level is really important. You've got to work out, what do you want to do with the prototype. No matter whether it's high or low fidelity, if you produce a prototype that's confusing to the person that you're presenting it to, then you're making problems for yourself. So you need to make sure that you're building it in the right format for the right purpose. In many cases, I've noticed recently, there's a lot of things where people are just like, we need a prototype. And whilst, a large majority of projects would benefit from a prototype, I think we need to get out of that headset of ticking boxes. A prototype is a tool that you use to answer questions about your project. So think about, what are we trying to answer, and what's the best way to get those answers. So does a paper prototype do what we need it to do, or do we need to look at how people interact with buttons or sliders and things like that? So do you need to go a little bit more high fidelity? It really comes back to those, what are the questions that you're trying to answer, and then find the right tool for you.
Thank you. And how do your users, or your the communities that you're working with, how do they respond and react, and what kinds of feedback do you tend to get, and how is that communicated backwards and forwards?
So prototype tested is really about qualitative data. It's not a quantitative project. You're not wanting to put it out there in front of hundreds of people to get those numbers. Really, the idea behind a prototype is getting that early sense check so that you can move forward. It's about usability and understanding and testing those concepts. If you're looking for quantitative data, prototype's probably not the right thing. Because of that, you only need five users to test most prototypes from a particular segment. If you've got multiple segments, then you need to go out to more users. But that's why it's so great, because 5 users and you've got enough data, because at that point your feedback kind of plateaus and you won't learn much more. Finding those right people is important. You've got to really think about who your users are going to be at the end, so that you can get a genuine response from them, get a genuine feedback from them as well. Avoiding people that know too much about a project is key, because if they're a little bit too knowledgeable, then their answers can kind of be structured by that. It's like asking somebody from the film industry for a review of your movie. They're just going to be looking at all the mise en scène and giving you all that kind of feedback, whereas the normal person would be like, yeah, it was really fun, I enjoyed it. So yeah, getting your real users in front of it is essential.
Thank you. And what kind of mindset do you as a designer need to have when you're building prototypes and testing them with users?
You've got to be really open, and also you've got to really think visually. So there's a great meme that I saw a few years ago where you had like 3 stick figures, and they've got thought bubbles coming off, and they're all like, yes, we're on the same page, right? And one had like a square, one had a circle, one had a triangle, and then there was another picture where they actually draw them on the board and go, oh, so we weren't all on the same page. So it's really, that's another benefit of prototyping, is that you visualize the thoughts that are in a collaborative group's head. That's a key to prototyping as well, is it's an opportunity for you to collaborate with the various expertises across your team. So it's not a designer's job to create a prototype. In fact, the designer should have the least amount of input in a prototype. What they should be doing is having a really, really great brief, and then they can visualize that. And at the point at which they're creating that prototype, I think they should have no questions to ask. They should be able to just go spend a day doing it and hammer it out as quickly as possible, because all of the work has been done. All of those questions that you have about, should this go here? How would that look? What do we want to happen on this page? Your team should collectively have answered those, so the designer's not having to stress, particularly if you're doing a design sprint. Yeah, nothing worse than a designer having to work 48 hours just to do a prototype.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the design sprint process, Greg, and at what stage prototyping you would expect to start being created and tested?
Yeah, so common place to do a prototype, and it's a really great way to do a prototype because you put it into a really short, rapid sprint, is the design sprint. If you've not come across it before, where have you been? But also, if you've not, check it out. There is a book called Sprint, which you can read. There you go. It's almost like we're prepared. And the idea behind that is you need to have a concept. You need to have the discovery work done, and then you pack that into 5 days. So you go, day 1 is your understand day, where you share and understand all the discovery and understanding about the topic that you're identifying. You identify which problem you're going to focus on. Then you come up with ideas for how you're going to solve that problem. Then you develop those ideas into a solution on Wednesday, and then Thursday you build that into a prototype. So you've literally got 1 day to build a prototype, which is where that whole idea of you've done all that pre-work, so the designer can just build that thing and not have to spend time thinking about where stuff should go and all that kind of stuff. And then on the Friday, you're testing that prototype. And within 5 days, you've built and tested a prototype that can move your project forward a huge amount. Because going back to what I was saying before about that risk and that gap between, you understand the problem, but you don't know what the solution is, that is that leap over that gap that allows you to progress forward. It worked really well in the charity sector because budgets are really low. You've got a big problem. How do you move the dial forwards? So you'd do a design sprint. You'd have all of that research and understanding about the solution and what worked. You'd have a prototype that you could present. And then you could go on a roadshow and get funding for that thing.
This is brilliant. Thank you, Greg. Really informative. I'm going to skip to the comments now. So we've got some questions coming in from the audience. How does someone make a portfolio if someone isn't in design? And maybe if Kelly or Greg, whoever feels that you would like to respond to that one.
Sure. I was given some good advice recently before I was in Hyper Island, and we had, now we have projects to show, but reaching out to nonprofits or, small businesses and offering to do things like a website audit or things like that, just to show you understand the design process and just sort of doing some pro bono work. Sometimes that works.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And I hope that answered your question, Ishita. And we have a question from Adam. Can you mention how you define a prototype? I've noticed that there are often mix-ups between prototypes, proof of concept, and on minimum viable product. Greg or Kelly?
Brilliant question, actually. It's a constant struggle of mine to get people to make sure that they're not misdefining things. A prototype should be something that you can throw away. So it should be big enough to test and provide an answer to a question, but small enough that if it fails, you can just throw that thing in the bin. A minimum viable product, should be a product. It should be something that you could ship, that you could actually have out there in the public. So throwing that away would obviously seem less than desirable. I think there's a lot of overlap between prototype and proof of concept, but I think potentially the use of those is slightly different. So a prototype is something you'd focus more on testing specific elements, whereas a proof of concept is kind of the big idea. So does the idea of this thing make sense to people?
Thank you very much, Greg. And I think I've captured those questions, but do keep them coming in if there's any more. How do you feel, Greg, hearing that this module sits as a whole 20 credit module now within this program, because it has evolved since 2019, and do you think that's important?
What, prototyping as a technique?
Agile making and prototyping, as a technique, and that it sits within the first 3 other modules on this master's program.
I think methods and governance for how we do things is really important, particularly going into industry, like sharing that knowledge with. We talk about digital transformation, but really it's about sharing learnings and understanding. A lot of these techniques aren't digital techniques. They came from product development or banking and places like that. Mm-hmm. So it's really about sharing those techniques and learning and understanding how we can better deliver projects and work. Agile gets used and abused quite widely, but you don't have to do it exactly as it outlines, but you can still follow those principles. They are really important, about throwing things away, testing and trialing and learning, and admitting that we don't know all the answers now, and focusing on answering some of those things, but doing it in a way that means that you're managing small chunks rather than trying to answer the whole. So yeah, it's greatly important that people learn those techniques as soon as possible and start applying them in everything they do.
Thank you. Becca, I'm going to hand back to you in the studio. Oh, we've got a question, sorry, from Richard. Do you still use affinity diagrams as a previous stage to create a product, or what are your best research methods to reach better outcomes? Do either of you use affinity diagrams?
We do. Yeah, we use them in almost every module. It was most helpful, I think, for picking apart interviews and sort of coming to, pulling out the main themes. And then other tools that we use a lot, I mean, I think it depends on what part of the process you mean, but I found user journey maps were really valuable, at least in my IRP, because it kind of helps you get in the shoes of the person you're trying to make something for. Hope that helps.
Great, thank you. Anything else to build on that, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, the methods thing is always a big topic, isn't it? There's always a Medium post about someone's come up with a better way of doing stuff. And the important thing for me, no matter what diagrams you're using, and I was discussing this with someone yesterday, it's not just creating one thing, it's taking that information and reforming it and reshaping it across a number of different tools. That's where the insight comes from, because as you take information from one place and reshape it and transform it for another diagram, that's when you can kind of start to see patterns and discover really, really useful insights as you go through that. So my best advice would be, think about where you want to get to, and think about like a process. So it's never about one diagram or one thing. Think about how you want to get from A to B to C, and how you're going to do that, and what's the best way to do that. What are the best tools for that? Some things work better together than others. So it's thinking about user journey maps and affinity diagrams and personas and how they fit together. Never use an artifact for the sake of using an artifact. It's got to provide value to you and the team.
Really interesting. Thank you very much, Greg. Oh, there we go. Ricardo's happy. Got it. Okay. I'm handing back over to Becca now for final builds and wrap up. Thank you, Becca. Thank you very much, Greg and Kelly.
Yes, thank you all. Thanks, Catherine. Kelly, Greg, loving your perspectives. True to form, Greg, there's definitely some points in there that if we had more time today, I would want to delve that bit deeper and say, really? Is that the case? Not use an artifact for the sake of an artifact. I think there'd be some really interesting debates that we had there actually in the studio. We'll have to kind of like bring you in next year and make sure we can delve deeper into that, because yeah, creative methods are really interesting. Like you were saying, bringing and drawing from all these different disciplines and practices is really healthy, and collaboration and co-creation is the way to do that, isn't it? And to welcome that multitude of perspectives. But is it the right tool? Is it the right method? Does it add value to your team? Really valuable questions to ask. And how does it add value, and what impact is it going to have? So lots of great starting points there, lots of wonderful thoughts. Kelly, it was just wonderful to hear you kind of hark back to that era, it feels like, that we had together with this module, and I'm really grateful for that. Thank you. So how do we wrap this up? We had a little bit of a brainstorm, myself and Catherine, this morning, and we wanted to kind of use this last bit of time to have the audience, if you're there, hello, involved in our kind of wrap up. So a common tool is a retro used, in the spirit of Agile Making and Prototyping, and we're going to encourage you to do that right now. So a little tool that we use here is a stop, start, continue, and we'd really love you to share with us that feedback on your experience of today's session. So in that comments box, if you'd like to, please share what you believe we should stop doing, start doing, and continue doing to refresh and revisit what it is that's been successful and where improvements could be made in this particular thing, this LinkedIn Live session that you've experienced with us for the first time. Thank you very much. It's been really lovely to have you. So please do share that in the comments box. What would you stop, start, and continue with regards to this LinkedIn Live? How did it feel for you? I'll let you do that right now. And as you are populating the comments box, I realized I flashed it up earlier rather quickly. Yeah, Greg just happened to mention Jake Knapp's book, Sprint. And it is very useful. There's a little point in here that he makes about the prototype mindset. And he says here on page 168, building a facade may be uncomfortable for you and your team. To prototype your solution, you'll need a temporary change of philosophy. From perfect to just enough, from long-term quality to temporary simulation. We call this philosophy the prototype mindset, and it's made up of these principles, and it goes into these principles. So I'm doing a little bit of advert for you there, Jake, across our LinkedIn Live, but it's really interesting to kind of tap into that. And I'd love to invite you, if you're out there in the world and you would love to get more involved in Hyper Island and finding that space to question theories, methods, mechanisms, tools, concepts, models, this is the place to do it. And we'd love to welcome you here. So thank you very much for your time today. Continue the prototyping mindset. Thank you, Nick. Amelia, stop. Oh, I'm intrigued. Stop what, Amelia? Stop just now. It's my first one I participate in, so keep doing more. Ricardo, thank you so much for that feedback. That's very, very welcoming to receive that. Love the concept of Hyper Island. Ishita, thank you. Namita, these kind of short knowledge sharing sessions are good to continue in future. It's good to hear real world experiences. Yes. Yes. Start to share and show examples. Yes. We were talking about that actually just a bit earlier. That would be a great thing for us to take away and have a look at and feed into future sessions. Thank you to the anonymous user there. Wonderful. All right. So we're going to wrap up now. Greg, Kelly, in the spirit of also this recent blog post we put out there about rebooting for 2022, can I invite you to check out with what you might Control-Alt-Delete? Is that putting you on the spot? Let's do a team checkout. What would you like to Control-Alt-Delete for 2022?
As part of your reboot. Yeah, I think it's really nice. Thank you, Becca, because it's kind of segue into, this prototyping mindset, I guess, of, reflection and pausing and looking back at what we've delivered. And I think, being really transparent, like this is a prototype. We're learning all the time and we're always testing things. So thank you for coming along on board with this. And if you're comfortable to share, like what you're looking ahead towards 2022, what you might want to change, what you're really deciding upon for stopping, starting, or continuing. Control-Alt-Delete was the other one. But yeah, what changes do you think you might be bringing
about my work?
For the coming year?
I hope in the spirit of prototyping I can continue to not worry about making mistakes or limiting creative thinking because of that fear, and sort of charging ahead. Because you never know when we're going to have another pandemic, so seize the day and charge on.
You've definitely had good practice, haven't you? Being thrown into the unknown.
It's okay. It worked out well, all things considered.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thanks.
We've got Amelia in the chat saying, please start sharing about these events on other channels through the Hyper Island network, including Slack. Thank you. Greg, have you had a moment to think about yours?
Yeah, reboot. It's something that's kind of been building up in my mind for the last 12 months, actually. It's really stopping looking to others for answers. So really thinking about your own context, your own challenges, the things that are happening around you. So really a good example is, constantly looking for the latest artifact template tool online and thinking that's going to solve your problems. You know, the person that's designed that has come at it from a completely different context to your own. So it's not kind of discounting those things, but it's thinking what is relevant to me and my current situation, and not getting upset when those things don't align, and really focusing on and adapting it to your needs. Yeah. So hyper localization is my big reboot.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, I think just exactly as you say, like seizing the day, just doing it, you know, because I seem to have adopted that mantra, like, what's the worst that can happen, you know, and that really is, and it's just like doing something and then just seeing. And I don't know, I remember hearing a while ago, there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. And like, you know, no matter what I'm doing and try and do, it's kind of like, yeah, as long as nobody gets hurt, you know, what's the worst that can happen? So yeah, trying to embody that. Thank you, Becca.
Thank you all. Yeah, so I'll check out with what am I rebooting for 2022 off the back of this experience. I would like to just welcome those multiple perspectives. And Greg, as you say, feeding into context, you know, bringing context into the room and being vocal about it. Give yourself this space to do so, because it's a great opportunity. And I think I will personally be taking the risk, that kind of idea of it's okay to take the risk, step into a space that's going to stretch you. We talk about stretch zones here a lot, and I think I'm really welcoming that today. So I'm very, very grateful for being here, and very grateful that Greg, Kelly, Catherine, we've been sharing this screen together. Jenny in the background, thank you so much for doing all the tech and the production. You can't see Jenny's face, but she's there. And along the bottom of the screen here, we have a little thank you. And if you have any further questions that you don't feel have been addressed, or you wish to just have a conversation to find out a bit more about the MA programs at Hyper Island, by all means, email Catherine directly and we will pick that up and be in touch. We'll share your comment, or save your comments rather, and be revisiting those in our own reflection and retro on the LinkedIn Lives, and hope to see you again sometime. We'll keep in touch. Greg, Kelly, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
And I look forward to hearing from any of you out there. If you want to drop me a note, more than happy to have a chat about programs or collaborations. Yeah, get in touch. Thanks. Thank you.